After the modest success of the third live-action movie, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were determined to course-correct the franchise, not only on the silver screen, but everywhere. As a result, the two creators got together to imagine the next chapter for the Turtles, a chapter that would have involved superpowers, alternate universes, and a fifth turtle. Join me today as I explore the unmade fourth film in the live-action franchise, The Next Mutation. In 1993, the third movie of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles grossed $42 million domestically, approximately 53% less than the second movie. While the film generated some revenue, it became apparent that the franchise was losing fans with every subsequent installment. To complicate things further, the comic book industry was coming out of a really high period of popularity. The creation of a new independent publisher in 1992 marked the beginning of a trend in highly stylized and often extreme author-driven comic books. The increase in competition for fans' dollars pushed the rest of the publishers to come up with similarly extreme and life-changing events, as well as gimmicky sales stunts, such as trading cards, glow-in-the-dark, and holographic covers. This sudden popularity of comic books came with a speculation bubble, not unlike the comic book crash of the late 80s. This coincided with other unfortunate events in the comic book industry, leading to a new crisis that put indie publishers and comic shops out of business. Mirage Comics wasn't immune to all of this. By 1994, the original volume of TMNT was replaced with a new one, written by Jim Lawson and in color. With Kevin Eastman back at Mirage, the two creators decided to reconnect and work together in the next big comic book chapter for the Turtles. Perhaps influenced by all the Silver Age characters around them getting upgrades, they decided to give the Turtles and Splinter some secondary mutations. The nature of these mutations wasn't completely defined. It usually consisted of more extreme versions of the Turtles, more menacing and distinguishable from each other, with organic armor and weapons, also known as morphtations. Leonardo would have gotten one claw, and perhaps a special rising sun bandana and knee pads. Raphael would have morphed into some kind of raptor turtle and sported an organic skull on his plastron. Donatello wouldn't have a physical mutation, but would have gotten telepathic and telekinetic powers. These powers would have given him poorer eyesight, forcing him to use special visors. Karai's Foot Clan would have also undergone a revamp, becoming more technologically advanced and updating their masks with a design inspired by Jack Kirby's parademons. By October 1994, the creators had devised a comic book arc that would have brought aliens, presumably Utroms, back to Earth, revealing their existence to humanity and bringing the Fugitoid with them. This would have made humans very paranoid about the aliens' intentions. There would have been a 3-year time jump from Jim Lawson's arc at the time, and the Turtles would already have gone through their new mutations. April, who was now married to Casey and secretly pregnant for 1 month, would have taken on the mantle of nobody. This bit may have been the reason why the original version of the character was killed off months later. With these new ideas for the franchise, the two creators aimed to give the Turtles a much-needed upgrade in the comics, cartoon, and movies. It was around this time that two first-time screenwriters, Christian Ford and Roger Soffer, pitched a movie titled Four Turtles and a Baby. New Line Cinema loved it, and the Turtles creators hated it. However, they did see something in that script that convinced them to hire the two screenwriters for a fourth movie. All four creators came together to develop a new vision and attitude for the Turtles. New Line, on the other hand, announced that it would be producing the fourth live-action movie in the franchise, rather than simply distributing it. This meant that, for the first time, they would receive a share of the merchandising revenue. New Line also got the rights to produce further sequels if they decided to do so. It also meant that the producer of the previous films, Golden Harvest, was no longer part of the deal. While the franchise's performance wasn't at its finest, the promise of impressive VHS sales was a deciding factor for New Line to take on the new installment. The movie was supposed to start production during the summer of 1995, and a teaser was even published in the free comic CBS Presents Action Zone. It was clear at this point that the film would carry the title The Next Mutation. But before the movie could get officially greenlit, a script needed to be approved, Ford and Soffer consistently received conflicting signals between the Turtles creators and the New Line Cinema executives. Even screenwriting guru Robert McGee was hired by Kevin and Peter at some point to contribute revision notes. Kevin Eastman had to travel from Los Angeles to Northampton to work with the writers and run the progress back to Mirage. The script introduced a fifth turtle named Kirby, after comic book creator Jack Kirby, who had passed away that year. While Peter Laird was always opposed to the creation of a fifth turtle, he agreed to it as long as Kirby's origin and nature were distinct enough from those of the main turtles. Peter even sketched several options to make Kirby look different, including giving him 3 toes and dreadlocks. All of this effort paid off, and the screenplay was finally approved by the Turtles creators. Unfortunately, New Line Cinema's marketing department ran the numbers and decided that, given the Turtles' declining box office, it was too great a risk. Therefore, they decided to invest in other projects. With New Line's option on the license lapsed, the project was picked up by the Motion Picture Corp of America. In this new phase, Eric Allard, the FX designer from the third movie, was picked up to direct the film. After reviewing the latest script, Allard said he could do it with an optimistic budget of $12 million. The movie officially entered development hell as it waited for a second studio to partner with MPCA to produce the film. This wasn't the only challenge for the franchise at the time. A flood in Mirage Studios' basement ruined most of the backstock, and whatever survived was later the target of an ant infestation. This, paired with the struggles of the comic book crash, forced Mirage Studios to halt its comic book publishing altogether. The Turtles had to move to the shiniest indie creator in the industry at the time, Image Comics. But that's a story for another day. Last year, a January 1995 script was leaked, offering a glimpse of what Ford, Soffer, Eastman, and Laird were pitching to studios. Keep in mind that it's unclear whether this was a final draft, as the entire script was later rewritten by another pair of screenwriters. So the screenplay would have inevitably suffered changes. With that said, let's dive into the story of the next mutation. The story started in a parallel dystopian dimension, where a villain named Spider ordered his minions to bring him the corpses of 4 mutant turtles and their master rat. Hellish Island, this dimension's version of Ellis Island, and home to the Statue of Tyranny, was Spider's headquarters. This was where he built his warp bomb module, a machine that could teleport bombs anywhere in the world. But the henchmen failed to put an end to the last Ronin, Kirby. This menacing turtle ambushed the villains, and with the steel tip of his Kamayari spear, he broke the heart of the glowing orb in Spider's warp bomb module, causing a quantum maelstrom. As a result, Kirby woke up, very confused, in our own Ellis Island. Somewhere else in New York, April had reinvented herself as a martial arts instructor, teaching Kamido, the way of the turtle. One particular young student, Josh, who had a crush on his sensei, could sense that April was going through some existential crisis since the 4 founders of the school disappeared. 4 senseis that also looked like turtles in the illustrations. It all happened when she went out to buy 16 extra spicy egg rolls for them. By the time she was back, they were gone without notice. April ran into a strange teenager on the subway who started making disturbingly familiar comments to her, almost like he knew about the turtles. April ditched the teenager and later decided to return to the turtle lair. To her surprise, she found the strange teenager on the couch. The teen in question was Michelangelo, who quickly morphed back into a turtle. This was how April found out that the turtles were back. A year ago, the mutagen in their bodies triggered a new mutation that made them lose control over themselves. Splinter knew someone in Japan who could help them, and that's where they spent the last year. Apart from Mikey being able to morph into a human teenager, Raphael had the ability to develop talons and turn into a raptor turtle. Leo could turn his skin into armor, becoming a hard shell. Donnie's mutation caused him poor vision, perhaps to compensate for his new inner vision. Some sort of extrasensorial power. Back on Hellish Island, Spider could still see glimpses of Kirby from the other side, thanks to a rip in the space-time continuum. Spider decided to fix the machine to cross to the other world. That was when his femme fatale technographed henchwoman, Miss D, offer to go to that world to hunt Kirby. The D stands for death. However, just like Donnie, Kirby sensed the arrival of Miss D into our world. She tracked Kirby down to the sewers and eventually found the lair, where April and Splinter were having tea. A fight broke out, and after April removed Miss D's cat mask, she discovered that this femme fatale was her doppelganger. It could have gotten a lot worse, but Kirby stormed in to fight off Miss D. Kirby tried to follow the runaway villain, but then he realized that Splinter looked a lot like his late master Sliver, and by the looks of it, it seemed like he was about to lose him again. This sad moment got cut short by the eruption of the turtles, who did not understand what this strange turtle was doing next to their injured master. Before passing out, Splinter warned them that Kirby was one of the good guys. Miss D returned to her dimension to report that all the turtles were alive there. Excited to kill them all again, Spider traveled with his technographed minions, Bob, the Crunch, Miss D, and Ton Man. Back at the lair, while trying to keep Splinter alive, the turtles found out that Kirby was one of 4 samurai turtles. They realized that their stories were pretty much identical, but with Spider instead of the Shredder. It didn't take them long to find out that Kirby was Donnie's doppelganger. Now knowing that they were dealing with another version of the Shredder that hated Splinter, they set up a trap for him at the lair. During this ambush, April discovered that Miss D used to be friends with the turtles until she betrayed them for undisclosed reasons. After realizing that they couldn't win this fight, the turtles, April and Splinter, barely escaped. It had become clear that Spider was more dangerous than the Shredder. The biggest evidence was that Raph had lost a chunk of his shell during the fight. It became apparent that Kirby survived the battle without any injuries. He was the last Ronin for a good reason, so they decided to learn from him. At the waterfront warehouse district, the turtles, April and Splinter, sought refuge. By training the turtles, Kirby realized what they were missing. They were strong enough for the Shredder, but he was just a human martial artist. Spider, on the other hand, was technologically enhanced, which made him faster and stronger. Kirby taught them that they needed to fuel their morphs with their essence. This made Raphael impatient. He started a fight with Kirby, causing a hole in the floor, revealing their next lair, an 18th century sailing ship. After discovering that this world's version of Spider had been killed by the turtles, the villains stole some nanobots that could be sent through the power lines to locate the turtles. This worked, but the turtles ended up freezing the nanobots in a pizza. Raphael discovered that in Kirby's world, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo were names of comic book artists. In turn, Kirby and his brothers were named after 4 Renaissance artists: Eisner, Miller, McFarlane, and Kirby. Donnie and Kirby found out that they could link their auras to combine their intuitive powers. They did this with the intention of tracking the bad guys. April, on the other hand, revealed that she had become a ninja because she wanted to make a difference. Unfortunately, all she managed to do was get people hurt, including young Josh, who had an almost fatal encounter with Miss D, leaving the poor kid confused. Donnie realized he could make special goggles that could help them fight against the technografts by integrating them with Spider's technoscraps. While working on it, Kirby revealed that his morphing powers were the reason his brothers ended up dead. Also, Kirby's morphing powers didn't affect his eyesight. None of this would come up later in the script. The turtles used one of the frozen nanobots to track the bad guys, and eventually fought against them in a government warehouse. The mission was a complete failure, with Spider escaping with 10 billion nanobots. The turtles and April survived Spider's lethal trap and returned to their barely recovered Master Splinter. Filled with regret for failing his students, he told them about Kuji, a combination of thought, word, and deed into a single indomitable force. To help April in battle, Splinter gifted her a combat gi that belonged to Tang Shen. It was half-eaten by moths, so April redesigned it into a skin-tight ninja catsuit. He also gifted Kirby a tsubute, a type of weighted throwing disc made of silver that belonged to Hamato Yoshi. Shredder stole the tsubute after killing Yoshi, but Splinter reclaimed it. Kirby, feeling guilty, rejected the gift, saying that it should be passed to one of his students. But this was intentional. Giving Kirby the Tsubute meant that he wouldn't be a Ronin anymore. After figuring out that the final battle would take place where the space-time continuum rift was, Splinter joined them on their fateful trip to Ellis Island. Once on the island, the Turtles moved in, while April stayed behind, protecting a dying Splinter from Miss D. After defeating her, she followed Splinter inside, where she joined the fight until all the henchmen were dead. Spider was focused on programming the nanobots to open the rift and create a ring of destruction that would destroy our world. But without his henchmen, he had to join the fight. Desperate, he ripped nanobots from his own power ring to turn himself into Nanobot Spider, a 15-foot-tall war machine. However, the nanobots he removed from his ring of destruction destabilized it, putting our world in greater danger by the minute. Leo was about to be killed by this technically morphed spider when he was saved by a muscled were-rat with snapping teeth and scything claws. Unfortunately, the giant rat sacrifice didn't buy them that much time. Spider stabbed him with his fist, and the rat demorphed back into his regular shape, revealing that he was Splinter, to the surprise of his turtles, who didn't know he could morph. Trying to put Splinter out of his misery, Spider took even more nanobots from the ring to create a rat trap. This made Kirby furious, revealing his morphing ability. He turned himself into a living flame, a fire turtle. Kirby used his Tsubute to attack Spider, making him drop some nanobots. By then, the interdimensional cyclone had become their fighting arena, and they ended in some sort of multi-dimensional wormhole with no horizons or skies. To escape this place, they had to fight against the nanobots, and later against a massive nanobot spider, which ultimately exploded, taking this multi-dimensional space with it. Back to reality, Kirby realized he had a responsibility with the people in his world. So he parted with the Tsubute, just before the closure of the portal. By the end of this adventure, April had finally accepted Josh's invitation to have pizza at his house, and the two reconciled after she treated him so poorly. However, to confirm his suspicions, Josh hid to see the Turtles and Splinter emerge from their hiding place. While making this review of the script, I had to condense the events significantly. The script had a lot of repetition, with characters constantly going back and forth, a clear indication that this was probably not a final draft. Too much time was dedicated to the new villains, to the point where I think the writers preferred them over the heroes in a half-shell. Now, here are some interesting details. According to this script, the original Turtle Lair was located under Tribeca Street. Spider wasn't just stronger and faster than the Shredder, he also had an IQ of 452. This was probably the result of his technological enhancements. The underground galley was accessible through a turtle tube from a derelict phone booth, something that was very likely thought for playset purposes. The script explained that Oroku Nagi was the Shredder, not Saki. This could be a mistake, or an indication that these were not the same turtles from the previous movies. Before becoming a sensei, April was a reporter, like in the previous films. During the long development of this movie, both Paige Turco and Kevin Eastman's then-wife Julie Strain were rumored to play April. As another interesting fact, this wouldn't be the last time there would be an alternate dimension version of Splinter named Sliver. Accidentally or not, the character would later appear in the 2003 and Mirage universes. One of the most fascinating moments in the script was when the Turtles assumed that Kirby's brothers didn't survive because they were samurai and not ninja, with ninja stealth being the essential survival skill. This set up an incredible eureka moment down the line, when the Turtles realized samurai didn't need to move through the shadows because they relied on their fighting skills. It isn't clear what the personalities of the other doppelganger Turtles were, but Kirby immediately took Leo's role as a leader, at least in actions. To me, making Kirby an alternate version of Donatello makes sense. His existence didn't cheapen the original four, and after his purpose was fulfilled, he returned to his world. Having said that, the Turtles felt more like their comics counterparts than the previous films. I don't particularly see the point in Mikey's mutation. Whenever he transforms into a human, he acts like Bruce Lee, but nothing ever stops him from doing so in his turtle form. I'm also not sure what the approach was going to be for the special effects. Morphing animations could have been done with computers in 1995, but I'm not sure if they were still trying to use animatronics. The reality is that this script doesn't feel like it was done for a budget of $12 million. For 1995 standards and this budget, this draft was unfilmable, especially given the constraints of the animatronic suits and the CGI of the time. I was also unable to find a clear theme to this script. There is a particular metatextual significance in the franchise evolving into a new stage in its history, but I'm unsure that was intentional. Ultimately, the script introduced too many characters without a clear motivation or identity. A potential theme that may have been lost between revisions was that heroes weren't defined by their powers, but their essence, something that became specifically clear in April's arc. The main villain also changed motivations multiple times throughout the script. Perhaps due to budget restrictions, 2 new writers were brought in to rewrite the script in 1996. Craig Shapiro and John Travis would be in charge of the screenplay for the next few years. Interestingly, in the 1995 season of the cartoon, the Turtles went through secondary mutations, a phenomenon that was likely influenced by the direction Kevin and Peter had in mind for the franchise. Unfortunately, by 1996, the idea of secondary mutations was abandoned, and the cartoon had to undo it before wrapping up the series. The movie was supposed to come out during 1996's holiday season, according to Playmate's marketing material. It was advertised to come out with a multi-million-dollar promotional campaign backed by Playmates, and the film was going to be distributed by Trimark Pictures. The story that still had a parallel dimension element to it would have a tie-in line of action figures and accessories. But of course, none of it materialized. Shapiro and Travis's last script was also a different story, as evidenced by the new title, The Foot Walks Again. This change was made in 1997, the same year as the Ninja Turtles' Next Mutation live-action show, so it's clear that the original idea was scrapped by then, but the title and concept of a fifth turtle were used for the show. According to Peter Laird, adding a fifth turtle was one of Kevin's ideas. Peter was okay with it in the context of the screenplay, I assume, because Kirby was technically Donatello from another dimension. What he didn't want to see was a fifth turtle that was left behind at the moment of their mutation. Unfortunately, this was the whole idea behind the fifth turtle for the live-action show. Kevin wanted to introduce Kirby, but according to legend, Fox Kids demanded that the fifth turtle be a girl. Seeing that they needed a show on the air to keep the Turtle Empire going, they ended up agreeing to it, but Peter didn't want anything to do with it. That year, the Ninja Turtle site announced that there would be no new movie in 1997, because they wanted to focus on the new show. They were expecting to release a film in 1998, and the new script would feature the Turtles in their adult years, Venus de Milo included. All mentions of a movie disappeared by 1998, and the project went back into obscurity for a long time. But it wasn't just the project that faded away. The Turtles were losing presence in 1998. Without a show and action figures coming out, they went into hibernation, only appearing through the Image Comics volume, which would get cancelled the following year. Some elements of this movie were later reused in many places. One of them was Steve Barron's project for the Hallmark Channel, where the idea of a dark turtle was going to be reused. In 2004, Peter Laird finally revealed some sketches for the Turtles redesigns in his Planet Racers page and later in his blogs. Peter would make Raphael go through a similar unnatural mutation into a monster reptile nicknamed Gamma-Raph, and Donnie would go through a similar transformation for the 2003 cartoon. Many ideas from that 1994 comic book arc would also find their way into Peter's Volume 4. The secondary mutation designs were later popularized when they were included as unlockable concept art in the TMNT Smash-Up video game. As of this writing, we know the other 2 scripts are out there because they were auctioned. I'm hoping that someday we'll get to know more about the later scripts. So, what do you think about this missing chapter in the Turtles' history? Do you think it would have made sense to give the Turtles secondary mutations? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.